This episode brings us to number 110. I know, where does the time go? I ask myself the same borderline daily. As for today's guest, Zach Pina, I'll sidestep the close circles and just say this. I'm a fan. A big fan. His photography is rad. He loves bikes, watches, and well, apparently we share an appreciation for things like John Mayer watch-specific Instagram accounts. Zach and I finally met in person at Wind Up San Francisco this year, and though it was a short chat, I was confident we would get together for an episode to get to know him right along with you all. I'm about to head out on a significant road trip, and I'm stoked to meet up with Zach to grab a coffee along the way. For now, here's my conversation, which includes notes on Crusader man jewelry with Mr. Pina himself. I hope you enjoy it. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H Podcast. Hey.
Wesley, what's going on, man?
How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Sweet.
Monday morning. Thanks for making the time.
No, well, likewise. Are you kidding me?
No, it's all good. I was like, Monday morning seems ambitious, but I can't remember who made the call, if that was me or if that was you. But either way, I think.
Yeah, I don't recall either. But happy Monday.
Yeah, same as well. Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, it was a productive one. I went and saw Dead and Company as well.
Oh, nice. Dude, somebody else I know who was at that show. Where was that?
It was in LA, Friday, Saturday, and I just went to Saturday.
Nice. How was it?
It was great. I've never seen them before, and I was like, this is their last tour. So I was like, it kind of seems like a moment. I should be there.
Is John playing with them?
Yes.
He is.
Now, while I was at the show, the interesting thing was I was told that it may not be the end of the Grateful Dead or the Dead or, John Weir and all that stuff. They may continue touring. Word on the street is actually John saying, like, I kind of don't want to do this anymore. And so he's been with the band, I think, like 10 years, maybe a little over. And again, this could be hearsay. I have no idea. This is just what was told to me. So I don't know, John. I have no idea. But
it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I feel like he kind of bounces from thing to thing. And again, I don't know him either, but yeah.
Right. He just did his big solo tour, which apparently went extremely well. And yeah, I think the word on the street is just like, he's like, I just kind of want to do my own thing, and focus on my stuff.
Cool. Were you close enough to see what he was wearing?
Funny you should ask, because there were only certain songs that had the big screen live playing the feed, because I was like second row, but like upper deck.
Oh shit. Okay.
So like my seats were great for visibility of like the band and everybody, but like they only used that huge screen. I actually turned to the person I went with. I was like, you know what I just noticed? There's no big screens for anybody in the back. And then the next song, it illuminated. And I was like, oh, I spoke too soon. And, but they would kind of come and go off of that screen. So I thought it was a perpetual of some kind from Paddock, which, he's on the AP train, and like, I don't know if he's an ambassador or not. I would imagine he is, because every AP he owns is like $300,000. But, I said, but he's also John Mayer making 30 million a tour. So who knows? So there's that, but I was like trying to look, and I was like, I wonder if he's wearing that Piece Unique 5004 that he talked about.
Oh, yeah.
And I looked up photos from Friday night, and it looks like he recently got an FP Journe, apparently. So he was wearing some FP Friday night, I think. And I'm pretty sure okay, so this is the nerd in me and potentially you. There's an Instagram handle that's like Mayer watches or something like that.
I was just gonna say, like, man, there probably needs to be like a JM like watch spotting feed or account or something.
No, it is.
Like,
it's
that's the real thing.
Yeah, it's literally called John Mayer's Watches, and it's watches _ Mayer, watches of Mayer. And so my nerdy ass freaking DM'd him this morning and was like, I don't see any photos that you've posted about the Dead and Co. And he goes, yeah, I think it was the 5004.
God, this is a real account.
Hysterical, right?
Okay, who runs this?
No clue. I just found out about it 2 days ago. It's genius.
This is Ben Clymer's burner account right here.
Right. It's gotta be, man. Gotta be. Um,
Oh my God, this is incredible.
yeah, it's really cool, man. What have you got on right now? I want to ask about what you're rocking.
Yeah. Well, not an FP Journe, I can tell you that. Like, I'm gonna get so lost in this account now. I'm wearing an Aerospace Evo,
Oh, cool.
Breitling Aerospace Evo. So I got in a quick ride this morning. This is a watch that kind of transitions from. So I wear it a ton on the bike. It's funny. I This is maybe one of my favorite watches of all time. I'm not really like a big Breitling guy. It's probably the oldest watch that I've got in rotation, and it's funny
Hmm.
because like the Evo is still the current gener. I mean, it's the latest generation, but I think it came out in 2015 or 2016, whatever the current permutation is.
Sure.
And I keep hearing whispers. I've been hearing whispers ever since COVID that like a new aerospace was coming. They're working on a new aerospace. They actually had when right after Current took over, they had a new aerospace. That was for the Orbiter. It had an orange dial, it had a new kind of font layout and everything. And that was like the first or second year that Kern was doing stuff. It was super limited. They all sold out. And I was like, cool, there's gonna be a new aerospace. And then crickets, nothing.
Right.
So anyway, I every year I'm like, maybe this is the year we get a new aerospace, but just kind of going back to so I wear this a ton. It's kind of it's a pretty good travel watch. It's pretty good on the bike. I've done bike races with it. It's
Sweet.
pretty good kind of week to week, and it's just like just kind of lives on the nightstand, easy grab and go, super accurate. I think it's getting pretty close to needing a battery because if I go to the other functions, they're flashing, which I think is like the low battery indicator.
Got
And
it.
it's funny because I don't, I'm not really a pilot watch. I don't really do a lot of like the aviation type stuff. I'm mostly like dive kind of you know, type watches, but this one stuck around. So cool piece. You have a
Yeah,
pilot watch on though, it looks like.
I do. In fact, it's the I IWC 41 millimeter chronograph
That's the new
on
41, right?
on bracelet, the blue dial.
Those are so good.
Yeah, it's great, man. I absolutely love it. I was craving a blue dial, and it just worked out time wise, and um, yeah, I love it. Actually, I just it. What I love most about this blue dial, honestly, is the fact that like, depending on the light, it looks like Carolina blue or it looks black.
The green's the same way. The green's the same way. It has this kind of like jungle green look, and then it
Hmm.
looks black. It reads blue in some lighting.
Yeah.
The bracelet on that, the new bracelets are really I had to size one of those bracelets for a shoot on the back of my car. We are like on location and like you're like pushing all the little pins out and the bracelet just exploded because every
Link.
bead is its
Yeah.
own thing. Like each link is 4 or 5 pieces in and of itself. And
Right.
it was a scary moment. There's like little pieces scattering all over in the dirt and stuff. But it's like a really beautifully engineered thing. And like if they weren't all individual pieces, it wouldn't be so comfortable. So
Right. Well, it's funny. I let the folks at the boutique do that for me.
that's probably wise. I mean, it's really easy to size. Like you just push and push. I mean,
Right.
with the little pin tools, like it's actually, I mean, it's almost too easy, but because it's made up of so many parts, you're like, oh, these are not connected. Like these,
Right. Totally. So what's funny is I have the all, so this one's kind of that two-tone sort of bracelet that they do that's like polished and brushed. I have the full brushed version on my Mark
oh,
18.
no way. Oh,
And
nice.
so what's interesting is I can tell the finishing actually on the clasp isn't nearly as nice as the other. However, my only pitfall with this bracelet is this like quick release, which everybody, that like 5 millimeters that it'll give you.
Oh, you don't love that?
No, no, I love its function. The problem is like when you put the bracelet on and you're like pushing on it, I oftentimes like push that button. So it releases it and it expands the bracelet. So I'm just like, Jesus, like, oh my God, now I got to tighten it again. I got to take it off. But now I'm just like super delicate and specific. Yeah, it's just one of those first world problems. But
That's a great
yeah.
bracelet, though.
Oh, dude, it's super comfortable. Yeah, outside of a Jubilee, it's the best, I
I
think.
agree.
Um,
Totally agree.
so you mentioned bikes. I was going to talk about this later. What's your history with cycling and bikes in general? Because my first job was in a bike shop.
Oh,
So
no way. Oh,
yes,
where?
In Cary, North Carolina, where I grew up. Yeah, we were Trek, Schwinn, Cannondale,
You were probably working sales at this bike shop like in the
mid 90s, 95.
okay, so like post Armstrong or during
This
Armstrong's,
this is
because
oh
the bike
God.
industry had just like this insane explosion. Because like almost overnight, after he
Yeah.
won his like fourth or fifth tour, and people were like, "Oh, the Tour de France is a cool thing," and like, "Oh, there's this Texan guy who's like just whooping everybody's asses," and then
And the Live Strong
overnight,
things, yeah.
yeah, the Live Strong thing, and then overnight, everybody was driving or riding,
Trek.
Trek, whatever those were, the 5700s or the U.S. Postal Service.
Right.
Were you guys
Yeah.
selling those or no?
Yeah, totally. But back then I was more into mountain biking. Like I was 15 years old. I was making, I don't know, 575 an hour. Um, and I only worked Saturdays because I was in school, and I raced on the weekends when I could, cross country. So, I had a Trek, oh God, what was it? 7,000 with the Quadra 21 front suspension. And I
Nice.
will never forget how much I paid for it because it was the most expensive thing I'd ever paid for. With my employee discount, it was $551.27.
And how many? I mean,
But it was a $1,200 bike.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. And I remember people were like, "Yeah, bikes cost $1,000." Like, did you? This is $1,000 bike. Like, this was like
Yeah,
obscene amounts of money back then. And how
yeah,
much travel did it have? It probably had 25 or 30
f-
millimeters of travel.
yeah, 4 inches maybe. Yeah, like 2.5 inches. I have no idea.
Oh wow.
Um,
So yours, okay, so yours was measured in inches. So that's yeah, you had like a nice bike then.
yeah, exactly. It was aluminum frame. It was crazy light, and it was that blue to green fade or green to blue fade. I can't remember. Depends on what side of the bike you're on, I guess. No,
There's really good riding. Wait, where in North Carolina? There's I've
I was right in the middle, Raleigh. Yeah, so I mean, there's like hard pack trails and stuff like that around there. But then I went to high school my last 2 years in Asheville, and so that riding up there is just super fun. Because again, hard pack.
yeah. No, I used to at an earlier stage in my career, I worked for a mountain bike apparel company and drove around the country in a Sprinter van. And
Who were you working for?
it was this company called Kitsbo, and they actually
Yeah,
recently they moved their outfit to North Carolina. They recently shuttered the business officially after a decade or so in business. But I did spend some time in Nashville. Got tattooed in Nashville.
sweet.
But I most of the time that I've ridden in North Carolina was around Pisgah,
Oh yeah,
where the
totally.
riding is absolutely world class. And
Loved
actually,
it.
they just had a big stage race that just finished, wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. So I was crewing for the Pisgah stage race for a couple athletes and shooting photos and stuff. And what
Oh,
an
cool.
insane! I mean, it's 5 days just in like the jungle of North Carolina. It's
It really is. Yeah.
super super gnarly, but like really epically beautiful. And yeah, I mean, I think if you're a mountain biker, I mean, you this probably goes without saying, speaking to you, but anybody in your audience, if you're a mountain biker, like you owe it to yourself to get to that part of the country and ride bikes.
100%. So what are you riding right now? How many bikes? It's N plus one.
Yeah, I have three bikes right now. I was part of the Specialized Ambassador program for the last few years. They've since kind of concluded the program with all of the athletes that they had part of that, but was lucky enough to be a part of the program for 3 or 4 years. And so I have an Athos right now as my road bike. So that's what I was on this morning. I have a S-Works Crux as well, which I race cross on in the fall, and that's kind of like a pretty good gravel racer as well. Super light, like really fun. But I grew up like in high school. I'm from northern Michigan originally and grew up like there's pretty good bike riding up there as well. And if you have any listeners from the Midwest who've done like the Iceman Cometh, which is this like big mountain bike racing event in northern Michigan in November.
I
Um,
think my brother-in-law's done that.
yeah, okay. My brother does it every year. Like, and it's funny too, because when you're just starting bike racing, it's like it's a 22 or 25 mile mountain bike race, and it's mostly, it's sandy, kind of, it's like cross country trails, like classically cross country stuff. And when you're 13, 14 years old, that's like a marathon, right?
Yeah.
Now it's a sprint. I mean, the
Yeah.
guys do this race in like an hour and a half or whatever, and you're just absolutely redlined. It's a drag race.
Right.
So I kind of grew up on a hardtail, I had a Mongoose, and its travel was measured in millimeters for sure. It was a
Okay.
chromoly frame, but it was a DX 5.3. I remember it quite well still. And that was kind of in the Schwinn homegrown era. So it was like Schwinn had the homegrowns. Your Trek, I think, is a similar era as well.
Yes.
And then Mongoose was actually still pretty legit at the time. It was kind of before they became like a big box brand. It was like the so yeah, they had a pretty cool mountain bike program. So that was kind of what I started out riding on. So all this to say, the third bike that I ride, and probably the bike that I like the most, is I have a Specialized Epic hardtail. So it's their 29er, super, super stiff. But it's funny because it actually has pretty playful geometry. So it feels like kind of like an all mountain bike, but it's super stiff and light. And every
Okay.
time I get on that thing, it feels like weirdly nostalgic, like bike racing again when I was like in my teens. So super fun. And that's a pretty good bike here for Northern California because we have, arguably they say mountain biking was invented here, depending on who
Yeah.
you ask. And if you're
Right.
from Colorado, they would say it came from Crested Butte, but they say mountain biking was invented here in Marin, and so we have kind of a lot of the OG trails out here. But I mean, they're glorified like fire roads, and we have pretty good single track, but it's nothing like Colorado at this point.
Right. Right.
So the hardtail, the Epic in particular, is like a pretty good. It's a pretty good like fire road ripper. So
Yeah, we've just got a lot of rocks down here in San Diego. Like it's just so rocky.
how close to the Belgian waffle ride course are you? Like, where in
Oh,
San Diego are you proper?
minutes away.
Oh, nice. Okay. So I
Yeah.
rode, I haven't done the race, but I was down there, I was down there last year or 2 years ago. And actually a homie of mine down there actually kind of put me onto the whole course and over the course of a couple days, because I didn't have like 9 hours to kill in one day. So we,
Right.
we broke it up into a few different sections, and I had a Specialized Diverge at the time with, 33 millimeter, Bon Jovi or Don Bon. Jesus, I can't remember the name. Big old
The
tires, 33
the
mil Pan
tire,
Racer
yeah.
type tires, yeah, and it was kind of perfect for that. So
It's funny. I haven't. Yeah, I mean, I've never ridden it, and honestly, I haven't even been on my bikes in months. We recently moved, and like, literally what you see behind me happened yesterday. Like, I mean, it's. I'm only just now. I've been living here 9 weeks, and it's like
oh,
my
congratulations.
office. Oh, thanks, man. So yeah, the last several months, and this was a gut renovation of a house. So like, it was a lot of work, and I have not been riding for that reason. And but I'm itching to get back on the bike. Actually, I just
Man, it's a full-time job. I mean, it's
yeah,
really a job
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, totally. But it's funny. I haven't heard homegrown in
Oh yeah,
age. Wasn't that logo like a tomato?
it was a tomato. Yeah, my
Yeah,
brother had one. Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, they were sick, and yeah, it was like a metal tomato was the head
Right,
badge.
right, right.
Those were
Yeah, I
super sick.
just
And I feel like Schwinn and Mongoose specifically, it was kind of like the glory days, I feel like, for those two brands. Because like
for
Mongoose was
sure.
coming off like a BMX high. They were doing a ton in mountain biking. Schwinn was as well. And they were both kind of like category leaders in a way. I mean, Specialized was innovating and kind of coming up through the ranks. Trek was pretty well established. But I feel like Schwinn and Mongoose were kind of like the brands to have. Like all the cool bike shops in Michigan at the time had them. So
Well, and like the stump jumper was like the origin story almost, and I think like the GT triangles and
GT
like
as well, yeah.
yeah, that was kind of a yeah
With Hans Ray, like, let me teach you
yeah.
how to
Oh my
wheelie.
God,
Let me
Hans
teach you how
Ray.
to wheelie.
Wow. Oh my God.
Dude,
Like,
he's Laguna.
well, I just think of like I think of like Missy Giove and Ned Overend and like all that crew.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. It's cool you're down there though. For the Kitzbühel roll, I mean, I did a little riding in San Diego, but more in Laguna. And I rode with Hans Ray and a few other guys, kind of some of the early guys who were at Oakley as well, like
wow.
Oakley
Yeah.
and Crank Brothers and some of those early brands that were based kind of around Laguna Beach. And they were part of this crew called the Rads,
Okay.
like rad, like radical. They
Right.
were just the Rads. And it was all these like I was kind of a cross country racer at the time. So I had like a Euro, I had an Orbea Alma. So it was like a hardtail 29er at the time. But like a very twitchy Euro 29er that's designed for cross country stuff. And they were like, yeah, like, so a friend of mine put me in touch with the Rads, and they were like, you should ride with these guys. Like they're super cool. The story's great. Like Hans Ray is going to be there, and so they have like a weekly like Wednesday night ride where they shred around like up above Laguna Beach, and then they go down this kind of like famous gnarly single track zone.
The top of the world.
Does
Yeah.
that ring a
Yes.
bell?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly where it is. And they bomb all the way back down, and they have tacos in front of this like huge fire pit, you know. And it was made like to this day. I've done like alley cat races in the city, and I've done like I did the fixed gear drag race down
Oh,
the
whoa.
strip in Las Vegas with the MASH guys. So this is like brakeless track bikes in Las Vegas, like unsanctioned on everything. I've done that as well, and that was also sketchy. But riding with the Rads to this day was like the gnarliest thing I've ever done. It's all these like old dudes, these like really, really nasty, nasty trails above Laguna,
Yeah.
just like rocky and rutted, super, super steep. And these guys are just, these guys are like 40, 50, 60 years old. There's this older guy who was in his mid 60s at the time. No, like I didn't know his name, but everybody just called him Balls. And like, I mean, just absolute animals on the bikes. And I've had like just a new respect for the type of like riding. And they say that around Laguna Beach, again, kind of in that part of Southern California, that was sort of the birthplace of like all mountain riding. So like the top of the world trail that you just referenced is kind of where guys were just like, yeah, we're just going to go up to the top. We're going to hike like bikes over our shoulders this way, hike up to the top of that thing and just like send it.
Wow.
For me on like a cross country bike with no dropper at the time and probably, 40-ish millimeter tires, it was just the hairiest, absolute scariest thing I've ever had to do on a bike.
Speaking of balls.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. No, it was a good time. It was a good time, but I would certainly take like racing through red lights and like the Las Vegas Strip on a Friday night over that, like any day of the week.
Oh man, that's great. So what were you doing for Kitspo other than, I mean, you were running, you said you were following them around for like
Yeah,
events and stuff.
I knew it was kind of like Instagram was kind of just starting to take off. So it was like they bought a Sprinter van and we put a bunch of product in it, and they were like, we're just going to drive around the country and like build trails, connect with local like trail advocacy groups, take photos, tell cool stories, and kind of build the brand out that way. So it was actually pretty sweet. I was the fourth employee at the company. Worked there for 3 years, kind of helped them like establish their voice and like the kind of the visual ID of their products kind of out in the wild. And we got to ride trails everywhere all across the country, from weirdo spots like out in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of the country, to there's actually like pretty amazing single track around Washington DC,
Oh, wow.
going around the city. So like you have these really intensely populated metropolitan areas, and then this like amazing single track that cuts through like the backs of people's yards, that like if you were to take a drone and just pop up a little bit, you'd be like, oh yeah, there's the city right there. But you pop back down and you're in this gully, and it's like tight, fast single track, and super, super fun stuff. So like it's easy to say there's great riding in Colorado, and there's great riding in California, there's great riding in the Pacific Northwest, but like there's actually pretty good riding in other parts of the country where people are a little bit more like, you have to, the trail architecture is a little bit more clever, I guess, to kind of hide the fact that you're in these populated areas. But that's cool. There's great riding everywhere. Yeah.
Look at Bentonville.
Right?
Yes,
Like,
that's
I mean,
a
it's
great
becoming,
example.
Like it's becoming like the epicenter of mountain biking thanks to the Walmart family.
Yeah, for real. I did kind of going back to the Breitling on my wrist. I did the Rafa Gentleman's Race in
Oh, sweet.
Bentonville 2 or 3 years ago, and not 2 or 3 years ago. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's a little bit longer. This is the watch that I was wearing for that. It was probably the most abuse I think this watch has had. But that was a gravel race. But I did that on a Canyon flight, I believe. It was a CXF something. I'm not super good with the acronyms or that.
Well, there's too many.
28. There's too many. Yeah, 28 mil tires. But Bentonville has, it's known for the mountain biking. We did a little bit of mountain biking, throughout the day. But actually, like the gravel riding there was absolutely nuts. It was pretty funny too. So I put together a 4-man team. We did like okay, but like it was kind of a I think it was 120 or 130 mile day, with pretty bad roads with people getting like sidewall tears and stuff. But like Lance Armstrong, for taking this conversation back around to your early days in the bike shop, Lance and George Hincapie and the two Walton brothers were a 4-man team as well.
Oh,
And like
wow.
they all had such bad luck that like halfway through the race, I don't mean to put these guys on blast, but I feel like this story's old enough that
No, man, if you beat them, you beat them.
oh, we definitely beat them. We beat them because they all had they all got so many flats and ran out of spare tires and all the stuff that and this is this is how wealthy the Walton family is.
Right.
The brothers are both pretty avid pilots. They had one of their homies fly. They have this like old Sikorsky that they
I
fly.
was gonna say hell chopper it in.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They choppered out to like one of the aid zones, brought all the guys 4 new bikes so that
Get out
they
of
could
here.
continue on. Yeah, they just choppered in new bikes.
I was just about to say a New York Yankees thing. As a Yankee fan, I'm like, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you're not winning championships based on money. So
Exactly.
it's really funny, man.
And here we are. I'm like, one of the guys on the team who had come from he had just traveled back in from Europe where it was quite a bit cooler. He was not heat acclimated at the time. It was hot as hell.
Oh, right,
Super, super
sure.
humid. You're just
Humid, yeah.
drinking the humidity. Yeah. We're like literally pushing him up some of the hills, and then we get to the finish finally, and I hear they're
Oh,
like, "Yeah, we just choppered in some bikes, like no big deal."
God. Man. Well, so I mean, you mentioned the watch again. What got you into watches to begin with? I mean, obviously that Breitling made it on your wrist years ago.
Yeah, oh man,
Do you remember your first watch?
I do. Yeah, I kind of ended up on it was a. I mean, the for the sake of the story, I think the first watch is probably not worth mentioning, but like I had some like Nixons and some like kind of G Shocks or whatever
Sure.
early on. Um,
Those get brought up a lot on this
they
show.
do get brought up. My dad gave me a freestyle when I turned like 14 or 15.
Heck yeah. With the shark fin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He bought it at the dive shop, and he wore freestyles. He was a diver. He taught me how to dive in Long Lake, which is kind of up in northern Michigan there when I was in high school, and I didn't get certified until many years later. But my first kind of scuba experience, and so yeah, he was just like, yeah, you're always. I kind of grew up around the water, and he always had cool dive watches. He had like Tag Heuer and Seiko, and
Cool.
so they were always kind of in the vernacular, and I always on the wrist. It is one of those things that like he didn't have like super fancy stuff, but he always had something on, and it just seemed like it was always part of his kit, and so that kind of stuck with me a little bit.
Sure.
And then yeah, later on in life, I was just like, yeah, I would love to like get a slightly nicer watch, and not knowing anything about anything, I started researching online and ended up with a Victorinox Dive Master 500, and I feel like that was the first like Swiss watch, I would say. And
Yeah.
then from there, I quickly got like an Oris, and then got other stuff, and then got completely because at that by the time I'd gotten the Oris, which was a TT1 at the time, I don't have that anymore, but that was the first Swiss automatic that I got,
Cool.
and started to kind of parse out, what makes a good dive watch, what I actually like, the kind of stuff that, and how it goes. Like it
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it's a rabbit hole. And at that point too, I'd started to make some friends on the forums and started to trade and sell. And so I would say that like it really kind of just started from Google searching and finding stuff online, and then starting to talk to people on the forums. This is all like before Instagram and everything,
Sure.
and yeah, I mean, it was all kind of accidental. And then at some point, like I started posting pictures of my watches on Instagram, and then people wanted me to take pictures of their watches. And then now I have a job from it.
No way. Is that kind of how it all unfolded? Was
Yeah, I
Instagram?
mean, for more or less, yeah, I would say Instagram was a huge part of it. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, I mean, my dad was also a photographer, and again, I never shot with him or for him. But again, like similar to dive watches, like camera stuff was just like always in the house, and so it was always sort of part of my periphery, I would say.
Is that what he did for a living?
Partially, yeah. He was actually he taught for many years at a boarding school
Oh.
in Glen Arbor, so I think he's about to retire.
Oh, cool. So he's still working.
Not past tense, yeah. I don't
Right.
think he can not work. I just think he would go insane if he didn't work. And I think I'm kind of the same way. I think I
Yeah,
would go
same.
nuts.
Yeah, yeah,
So
totally.
I'm gonna be doing something, I think, until I'm 100. So we'll see what
Right.
happens.
Right. Um, it's interesting. We obviously met at Wind Up formally, even though I've, given you the follow, I think a while ago. And you've worked with a bunch of different brands, obviously. We're both friends with the Worn and Wound crew,
We know
clearly.
all the same people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just a matter of time. And then you shot the Chapek, I think, right, for
Yes, I
Collective,
did.
which that dial is just like insane. Um,
I I mean I feel like I've said this before, but to anybody who hasn't heard it said by either you or myself, like um continue to ignore Chapek at your own peril because I mean they're expensive, but like they make the coolest dials, and that is of all the cool dials, that is one of the coolest I think that I've ever seen. I mean, it just looks like you're looking into an aquarium from the side. It was like,
right.
how do we capture, how do we do this dial justice? It was like it was one of the most fun watches that I've ever been able to shoot, but it was also just one of the most challenging because it was like you're holding this like breathtaking piece of art in your hands, and you're like, how do I do this thing justice? Like
Mm.
I mean, you really want to be able to show like what it feels like to kind of hold it. So that was that was a really unique honor. And the collective guys have done, and they did an IWC that was also very cool. And I would just
Yeah.
say that like those guys are continually like trying to find the most interesting stories around watches and like how they can tell them. And I love that. Like they're always kind of pushing the envelope there. So
Okay, so how did you like? So who are some of the brands that you've also worked with outside of the aforementioned?
oh gosh. Yeah, I've done
It's a long list, but like, what are some of the more recent ones that you enjoyed?
done some stuff with I mean I've done a good amount of work with Hamilton, and I
Hmm.
feel like they're one of the few Swiss brands that really want to do like lifestyle marketing.
Hmm.
Um and I feel like the Swiss, like bless their hearts, for the longest time have been trying to do like luxury marketing. But I think what they're realizing in the United States is that like the US consumer doesn't respond to luxury marketing in the traditional sense. We respond to like aspirational lifestyle stuff that like inspires action and helps us to connect to like the stories of the products themselves. And I feel like Hamilton actually, of all of the groups in the Swatch group, or of all the brands in the Swatch group, I would argue that like maybe they really have kind of tapped into something pretty early. And I
Hmm.
do a ton of lifestyle work, and they've really kind of tapped into something like that kind of helps push me creatively, but also, drives really interesting stories for them. So they've been like an absolute delight to work with. Um, I've done some stuff for Alpina, for Grand Seiko, for Marathon, for oh gosh, Oris Seiko.
So when you're working with, yeah, yeah, yeah. When you're working with Grand Seiko, are you working through Nick Roberts at all? He was on this show
I
before.
have worked with the Nick a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've interfaced directly with like the the Grand Seiko kind of marketing and content teams, but I feel like Nick is always kind of in like the AWACS plane, hovering the battlefield, so to speak. So he's never far from the conversation. And back when I was doing more editorial work, Nick was part of those conversations directly. But as I start to do kind of more content for brands specifically, that's outside of the editorial space. It's been more direct. But
So
Nick is
when you're,
another like awesome guy.
oh, for sure. Yeah, I love them. What is like the calendar like for you? So if you're contracted out, like how far in advance do you get notice? Are you a year out? Are you 2 months out? Like, or does it vary upon a
Yeah,
brand?
that's a good question. I mean, for like bigger commercial projects, which I'm in the process of wrapping one now, and we're kind of in pre-production for a couple others for the fall. Those are like several months, I would say 3, 4 months, maybe more sometimes. Um, whenever there's video or travel involved, the more time that you have for something like that, the better, just because you can put together a better team, you can do more location scouting, you can kind of just be a little bit more thorough in every facet of the pre-production process. So that's awesome. I definitely prefer that. And I would say that my wife prefers that as well because we can plan our calendar a little bit better. When I was doing more editorial work, you're usually the last person to find out about something. So
Mm.
like the brand tells an editor somewhere, they're like, "Hey, we want this story," and the editor's like, "Cool, let me see who can do it." And then they figure out who can actually like write the story, and then they figure out who has to shoot the story. And I'm the last person. They're like, hey, we need this shot. And I'm like, oh, cool. It's in Rome. Oh, that's cool. When? It's next
Next
Friday.
week, yeah.
I'm like, it's Saturday right now. This is 6 days away. So I really don't do as much editorial stuff anymore, just because like, uh,
Too stressful.
it's awesome, but it was pretty stressful, like just trying to keep the calendar dialed for that. So
Right, right. Well, I mean, you mentioned teams. So in your sort of situation now, are people coming to you, Zach, saying, "Hey, we need this shot," and then you find the team and all the puzzle pieces, if you will, or is it still kind of like a you're the photographer, but this is who you're going to be working with?
yeah, sometimes, yeah, I produce a lot and I shoot a lot. And generally speaking, if if I'm producing it, I want to shoot it because I'm usually producing things that like I would want to shoot. So, but yeah, they would come to me, or they come to my company and say like, we're launching this project, we're launching this product. We think this is the messaging that we want to put behind it. Like, what would you do for that? And I'd be like, well, we could go to this place, we could do this type of thing. I can put together this kind of a team for it if you want content that delivers X, Y, and Z. Those are kind of my favorite projects to work on, because you can take something, you can take kind of an idea that's in its relative infancy in terms of like, a creative director
A
says like,
concept.
this is
Yeah.
kind of the vision that we have for it, but you know how would you kind of color in the lines and start to flesh out like what the skeleton would actually hold on it. And that's super super fun. And I don't really shoot video just because, I mean, I can, but I have people that I collaborate with that are way better at it than I am. And I would rather be able to produce something and build a team for it. So I have a couple different directors that I tap for different things, kind of depending on what the adventure is. And a pretty long list of other creators and talent and collaborators and assistants and stylists and these types of people that you can kind of bring in for various projects, because it's awesome having like a good network of people that you can bring in for various things, because it helps keep the production pretty nimble, but also like everybody that you bring on set adds like a ton of value and is kind of a force multiplier. So
Sure.
it's kind of amazing. I mean, it's really difficult for me to sit in front of my laptop, when a brand is like, hey, we want to do this, but like I'll go out on the bike for 2 hours and then come back and like know exactly how I want to
Mm.
do it, who I want to hire. So I feel like I have to keep writing to be able to keep like focused on how we want to. It's like it's become my like thinking space, kind of, where those like, you know 90-minute windows. And sometimes it's like if I get kind of in a bind, or I'm like, I do have no idea where we're going to shoot this, or I don't know who can do this thing. Like you go out for a ride and you're like, yeah, I remember I saw this post on Instagram from this guy that I met at this show like 5 years ago. Like I should see if he's still in that location. And then I'll send him a DM, and sure enough, like we're off to the races. So
Oh, that's sick. I love that for you. Yeah, I love that because I back when I was writing more, like it was absolutely, a think space for me as well and kind of a meditation. But let me ask you this: do you ride to music or podcasts or anything like that? Because I'm also the kind of person that like I cannot be left alone to my own thoughts because
it depends on the podcast. I've ridden to the Standard Age podcast several
oh,
times. So
sick.
yeah, there we go.
Nice.
Shameless plug. I do kind of prefer music, just because I found that like I can kind of tune out a little bit. And by tune out, like I'm still paying attention to traffic and stuff, but I've just found that like you tend to drift a little bit more if it's a podcast, or you tend to pay less attention to kind of what's going around you in the periphery. And I've been listening to music for so many years that it's just kind of automatic at this point. So
What are the jams? What are we listening to?
I feel like this is a better question in like December, when my Spotify like year-end review
Uh,
is is
All right, let's start here. Common question I ask: what was the first CD you ever bought with your own money?
oh, dude, that's a great question. It was, I do actually have the answer to this. It was from a band called Our Lady Peace.
Oh, yeah. Oh wow.
If you know Our Lady Peace.
That was the first CD you ever got. Interesting.
Yeah, dude. It was, I'm old, man. Or maybe, I don't know how old you are.
I'm 43.
Okay. Oh, okay. We're almost the same age. Yeah. All right. I don't feel so bad now. I was like, I'm usually like the oldest dude in the room. I swear to God. Like,
Yeah.
so
Well, how old are you?
I'm about to turn 40. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Our Lady Peace. Well, I
yeah,
feel like
Clumsy.
with
It was Clumsy. So 1997, it had just come out. And I there's a song on there called 4 a.m., which has kind of become like their anthem. But at the time, like nobody knew who this band was. But that was like my favorite because I listened to the radio a lot and like recorded again, like dating myself a little bit here, but like, like we recorded like mixtapes from the radio off the radio.
yeah, the record and play button at the same time.
Exactly at the same time. Yeah, exactly. So we did a lot of
Um,
that, and Our Lady Peace was on like multiple mixes because it was always on the radio. But anyway, that was the first album I bought with my own. That's a great question.
that's cool.
I don't listen to them very much anymore, but I kind of went into like a more of like a emo punk rock. I was in the kind of the punk, because I skateboarded
Hmm.
at the time in middle school and high school. So we were listening to a lot of like Bad Religion and MXPX and
Heck yeah.
Less Than Jake, and then that all kind of turned into like post-hardcore, like emo, post-hardcore, all that stuff. So I feel like I still listen to some of those kind of emo indie-ish bands. So a few of those usually kind of make the onto my like year-end year-end playlist.
Sure.
I have an Alkaline Trio tattoo that I got in college
Oh
early on, so I
wow.
could get into shows for free. I still listen to Alkaline Trio a lot.
Well, Matt Skiba.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, Skiba, exactly. I've seen them a whole bunch of times as well. They're a cool band. But I think when I'm writing, it's less like punk and hardcore and more like it's kind of cringy to say this, but like a lot of house
I was gonna say like electronic. Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah.
for sure. And there's cool, I mean, there's cool, like there's cool like it's it's like I mean, there's some like very cringy, like Euro trash type electronic music that I would maybe not, this is like Mykonos soundtracks and stuff that I would maybe not admit to listening to, but
I Beather.
for writing, I beat it. I beat it. This is the soundtrack of I beat it.
Yeah. No, dude, I get it.
Just wait for the drop.
Oh man.
Um,
Well, I mean, but that's the kind of stuff that you could sort of get lost to and start to think about your photo shoot because it's not like lyrically based and you're not listening to the track and
and sometimes when it's like too much storytelling, like I love The National and I love,
mm,
but like I sometimes like some of the stuff is like too storytelling.
yeah.
But I would say like if a few songs from the Menzingers end up on my like best of every year, and they are like kind of modern post-hardcore. I think they kind of came out of the same scene. I feel like we're probably pretty close to the same age. They also came out of the Midwest. I feel like there's a very, you know, I don't listen to a lot of like the older emo stuff anymore, but like for some reason the Menzingers are still making great music. And
Mm,
if I were to name drop and recommend, that would be a band that for this that I could comfortably admit to listening to currently.
sure. Yeah, yeah, cool. Well, here's a random question that I thought of while you were talking a few minutes ago is that like when you're in the preliminary stages of a brand approaching you and kind of getting like, hey, what would you do for us for this project or this piece or, this item?
Mhm.
Are there any steps or like, are there any things that you can do to mitigate them taking your ideas and running elsewhere with them and having that done by somebody else?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of it,
Have you ever run into that?
yeah, that's a great question. Not, I haven't personally, actually, yes, I have. Uh, I have. And
That's got to
it
be
it
frustrating.
wasn't my project specifically. It was for it was for a client I was consulting with. And so I had kind of made the connection and we had talked about building something together and then they were interfacing with this brand
Mm,
to do something. And I think in some of the exploratory calls, it kind of turned into like a brainstorm and we were just like spitballing and there were some cool ideas in there.
mhm.
And in that session, they were like, yeah, wow, these are some great ideas. Like, we'll get back to you. And then I was like, cool. And then stopped interfacing with that client directly because we were just working on other things. And then like I, checked in with them after the fact on that project after I was like, I haven't heard anything on this. And they're like, yeah, they went with somebody else. And then, 6 months later, they went with somebody else and they kind of did the thing that we had been talking about. And so it has, I mean, I feel like it was pretty low stakes in that instance because it wasn't me personally.
Gotcha.
I think as like a general rule of thumb, if you're a creative director, don't do that. If you're listening to this and you're a creative director. And the other thing is like if you're a creative, there is a little bit of it's a it's a faith-based enterprise in a sense that like you have to believe that they are talking to you because you're the only person that can execute the thing that they want. And that's it is kind of a hard position to be in because oftentimes like there's so much great content out there, there's so many great cameras out there, and there's so many people capable of having good ideas.
Yeah.
It is actually not that easy to execute big ideas. And I think brands want new interesting things. And like when you go into these conversations, like obviously I think you don't want to give away the sauce, so to speak. Like we try to do as much exploration as possible and give them the assurance that me and my team or whatever team that we build for their thing is going to be capable to do the thing that they want. But we try not to go too far down that hole until like the train is moving, I would say. And because otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's certainly like a risk. It's certainly a risk, but conversely, it's a risk for them to be like, hey, here's the best person for the job. Let's take this idea and then hire like the third-rate person for the job. Like you're going to
Right.
get not the best person for that. So, has that happened to you, or is this isn't anecdotal for you?
No, 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 no. I just, so much of this podcast is kind of not just for me, right? So like maybe it'll apply to somebody else and maybe they could learn a thing or two, but you know, how do you set your pricing then? Is it project based? Are you day rate or is it both?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. Yeah, I mean, every single project is different, and commercial projects are kind of priced differently than editorial,
Mm,
because just because of how the images are used. Generally speaking, through editorial, when a brand hires a creator to create images that are for editorial, like they're not making direct money off of editorial because it's used
right.
through other outlets and you're telling a story for those things. I think I think the profit sharing in that instance is more like inferred, like through. So, for example, like you shoot something for Hodinkee or something like that goes in a Hodinkee story. This is amazing, but like nobody's really making well, not directly. People are not making money off of these images because it's a story about something that goes on Hodinkee.
Right.
Of course, as things drip through, Hodinkee has a store, or people go to iwc.com or whoever the brand is to maybe buy something later down the lines, versus a brand coming in and hiring and saying like we need to shoot like an image for a billboard, and it goes
Right.
up there and people driving by see the billboard and then they go to the website and they buy the thing. So those types of images are just priced differently, commercial versus editorial. So yeah, it really kind of depends on the project. But I have, like any creator, I have kind of a base day rate, and then we kind of have to build everything out from there. Because as you spend a lot of time in this rabbit hole, it's like the photography or the creator's price is usually like just one line item on a big long list, and it's
Right.
kind of amazing how expensive stuff gets. Again, not to put
Totally.
anybody on blast. I was on an exploratory call pretty recently with a prospective client that I would love to work with, and the client referenced past work that my team and I have done, and they were like, "Yeah, like let's do that, but with this." And I was like, "Oh, perfect! Like, well, that cost this amount of money," and they were like, "Oh, that's a lot more than we thought it was going to cost." And I mean, it is, but then you factor in travel, and this is a 12-man team, and this is 6 days of shooting on the ground, and this is
Wow.
underwater, and this is on land, and this is boats, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this camera, and this, all this stuff. And it's like, it's not just a video for Instagram anymore. This is like an operation. And,
Yeah.
I wish that costed less, but, as the line items go, like it does not cost less. There's just no, there's no world in which we live in that like that kind of stuff is done inexpensively. And if it looks like a Hollywood thing,
Yeah, it's because it costs like it is. Yeah, it's funny. Like the way I think about imagery for Standard H, and as it's evolving, the brand itself is evolving. I really do try to think about images that aren't so of the now, right? Like you can get future use out of them. And so it wasn't like, oh, well, that's just a still from that like Instagram reel you posted 7 months ago. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, you want longevity, right? Like you want to stretch that dollar. And because they're finite, the money tree out back hasn't grown yet.
Yeah, like we planted
So
the money tree next to a lemon tree,
yeah.
so hopefully that takes. But I mean,
Yeah.
you're in the great position of like classic cars and classic cameras and like vintage watches and classic like apparel and hats and stuff. Like all the stuff has this like this
Timeless.
could be from 2 years ago or
Yeah.
this could be from 40 years ago or 40 years from now. Like no one knows, and that's kind of the beauty of it. And I feel like you've
Yeah.
done such a great. I mean, even the logo has like a I mean, it is sad. I mean, there will be a time when people don't know what your logo means, and I mourn for that day
Same.
when
Same.
that passed. My first two cars were both stick shifts, and I don't have a stick shift currently because it's not practical for work or for family, but I would have one if that was the case.
What was the first car?
It was a late 80s. I think it was an 87 or 88 Bronco 2.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah,
Like
like red with
boxy.
the white
Yeah.
stripes, super boxy. It was a rear wheel
Amazing.
drive, and it was the scariest thing to drive in the wintertime because it just slide out from behind you. But I saw one here. I saw one here. Oh no, we were on a shoot a couple weeks ago down in the desert, and I saw one like parked outside the Mexican restaurant we were having dinner at, and I was like, "This is the same car. Like it had the same like lockout hubs, the same everything, and
Sweet.
it was cool to see that again." And then I had a Dodge Shadow after that, which was like that was like my car that I drove throughout college. It was like an early 90s Shadow, like 2.2 liter four cylinder that was like kind of faster than it looked, but it was definitely like a crappy car. But like when you're in your late teens and 2.2 cylinder feels like a lot of car.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, man. The Bronco too was epic. So
you've probably told us before. What was yours?
my first car was actually I don't know that I have shared this before. Um my very first car was a 1988 Ford Taurus wagon
Yeah, buddy.
handed down to me by my mom.
Was it
And
like beige?
no, so so in 87 my family got like a gray on gray, fully loaded electric this and that, and it was just like the sickest station wagon, right? For Ford at least. Well, 9 months later my mom got hit and totaled that
Oh
car.
no.
And that lady, the lady who hit my mom's insurance could only pay for this burgundy over gray cloth seats, not even leather, dude. I was,
Oh no.
we were bummed. So, but anyway, that became my car, and the seats just like we called it the party wagon, obviously, and like it was just either I loaded my friends in the back or I was throwing my mountain bike in the back, and I was going mountain biking on the weekends and stuff, and I've just been a wagon guy my whole life because of that.
My brother had a late 80s wagon as well. I feel like it was a Taurus, but it was this cream color. Same thing.
Chevy Celebrity.
It was no, no, but I know exactly what you're referencing. Seats folded down, but we would get both of our mountain bikes in the back of there before
Yeah,
he got his Bronco. Like we
totally.
wised up to it. We would just like stack the bikes on. So like all the beige from the seats folded down were like stained with chain
Just
rings and
filthy.
grease and shit.
Yeah,
Like yeah,
yeah, yeah,
super
yeah.
dirty. Yeah.
That's
Those are, I
hilarious.
mean, I don't know if we partied probably as hard as you and your homies, but we certainly like trashed that car.
Oh man, I this podcast isn't about me, but I've got stories for days about that car. But
You were,
and
but it
then
sounds
when
like you're a wagon guy. You're a wagon guy then.
I am, but so there's a couple of things there. Well, then I graduated high school and I got my grandfather. He passed me down his '88 Jeep Cherokee Laredo, which was
Oh, hell
sick.
yeah.
And I have talked about
With the
that.
wood or no?
No, no wood, just navy blue over gray with like that plaid cloth seat. It was so beautiful. And it was mint. It was so mint because it was like, my retired grandfather's car. You know what I mean?
And in the
So,
South, in the South, you guys didn't get snow. So like everything stayed pretty, because in Michigan, like cars don't last very long. They just,
Right.
even like
Salt on the
newish
roads and
cars just
yeah.
get absolutely hammered with rust. And so it was always funny to like, whenever we would go to California or Florida or like family vacations, like we would leave Michigan. We're like, wow, cars here are like so nice all the time. Like there's there's no rust
Yeah.
on stuff unless you leave it out. So for you, like you could get a mint late 80s Cherokee with in like amazing condition, probably like 10 or 15
Yeah.
years after the fact.
Yeah. No, it was amazing. I loved that car. But what's funny about the Bronco 2 actually is that my neighbor two doors down was a year older than I am. So for a short time he drove me to school in his Bronco 2. So I used to ride to high school in a Bronco 2 for a very short time, which was cool. But you're okay, so you're in Marin though. You're north of San Francisco. What took you there?
I for Kitspo actually. So Kitspo was based here in Marin. I was living in Utah at the time when I met the guys, and I was in Salt Lake for a few years. Kind of, I was working at backcountry.com. That was kind of where I
Sure.
got sort of my marketing experience, copywriting experience. I was doing that, and I was a bike messenger. So
Sick.
I was riding a fair bit and writing, and it was a pretty easy, simple. And that's when I started like actually racing road bikes, doing like crits and stuff on the road because the road
Right.
riding there is incredible. I came into Salt Lake as more of like a fixie kind of mountain bike rider, and I left as like a road bike rider. But yeah, I moved out to Marin and to work for Kitspo because they were posted up in Larkspur, which is kind of like down
Yeah.
the way shortly, and I didn't really know anything about the area. I remember asking a friend who had moved from the Bay Area back to Utah. We were kind of crisscrossing, our lives were kind of intersecting at that point. I was just like, man, what's the bike riding like in the Bay Area? Like, am I gonna like it? And he goes, it's pretty good. And if you live in the Bay Area, you know that the riding here is more than pretty good. It is absolutely
Right.
world class. I mean, it's pretty bananas. So, we have kind of a mix of, mountainous, mountains and super long climbs, big wide open farm roads kind of stretching out into West Marin. Marin County as a kind of a spiritual thing is mountains and ocean and big wide open plain grassland. And the scenery here is very dramatic. There's like redwood forests, and it's also very temperate. So it gets pretty cold in the wintertime, but pretty cold for me is, mid 40s.
Right. Right.
You're a California boy now, so yeah,
Yeah.
mid 40s is very cold, I would say, for
Right.
California. But in the summer it gets really golden and super warm. So it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of paradise. We're spoiled. We have good coffee and pretty good food, and we just don't have. I mean, if I don't surf, but I have a lot of my buddies surf. Do you surf as well?
I
You're
do.
in
Yeah.
you're in surf town. Okay, yeah,
Oh yeah.
you're close to things.
Yep. Yep. So what's the daily car now? What are you driving now?
I'm glad you mentioned like the wagon thing. I'm like kind of like wagon boys for life at this point. I have a
Sick.
Volvo V60 cross country,
Oh,
so
amazing. I've thought about that being my next car.
it's sick. It is, it's kind of like, for the longest time I was just like the Volvo's this like soccer mom car, but like the newer Volvos are so sick. And I test drove before I got this one, I test drove their oh shoot, what's the electric, oh gosh, the trim, I'm
Oh,
like spaced on the
the hybrid? Is it the hybrid?
um
I can't remember honestly.
like the Polestar. Jeez, I don't know why.
Oh, right, right, right.
There's a V60 and a V90 Polestar edition with like, it's just the upgraded everything, and I was just like, whoa, I need one of these, but like maybe not just yet. So I did not get the Polestar edition, but yeah, it's a rad, it's their turbocharged four-cylinder,
Yep.
whatever. Um and it's awesome. And there are V60s that exist. I think the last one that they made with a stick shift with a manual tranny was in 2016, I want to say.
Okay.
I was a little bit older than I wanted to go, but I really did want like a manual transmission. But one, they're pretty hard to find, and two, if you can, they're pretty high miles, and three, I needed a car that like I could. And in hindsight, I'm glad that I had this sort of foresight because it would have been problematic. But I use my car for productions, and sometimes like you need to have someone in the driver's seat stunt driving while you're like hanging out the window.
Right.
And I would argue that like a minivan is the absolute best possible car for productions because you just pop the sliding door open and you get all these sick angles. But like the IWC that you own for Collective, we shot that on the Bay Bridge, and so I had an assistant driving, and there's this guy doesn't know how to drive a stick, and so there was that instance, and there were other instances where it was like, okay, I need a driver, like let's go and do this thing, and we'll just do a few passes or whatever that looks like.
Right.
I sadly gave in, but I was able to get a much newer one. And but anyway, it's an awesome car. Holds tons of gear, holds skis, holds bikes, holds all this stuff.
Sure.
And it feels fast. I'm not like a car guy by any stretch, but like I don't know, I'm a Volvo guy for sure.
That's sick. I think the new design is amazing. So if you have a recent year, they're so beautiful. What color's yours?
Totally agree. It's black, which
Okay.
I mean, yeah. I feel like the soccer mom one is white. I feel like if it's a white with the beige interior, it's a great look, but that's the soccer mom look. So no offense to, but you guys, you've talked a little bit before on your podcast, and I've heard you talk about how like cars and personalities, and I love all that kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's you can't deny some of the personality for sure. But yeah, it's black with the black interior, so it definitely is pretty warm in the summertime. But
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I'm hoping to get we'll get the V90 with the Polestar trim at some point. I feel like that's kind of probably next. But
My mother-in-law has a V90 cross country, and I wait,
I
is it
actually
a
like the early 2000 V90s, like super boxy with like the tall light profile on the back. But that was actually the first time where I was like, okay, these Volvos are actually kind of sick. Like when they transitioned out of that like East-West Germany looking Volvo, like those really strange kind of Scandinavian design language to the boxier stuff from like the 90s and early aughts. I just think they're so sweet, and they've carried that aesthetic into a more kind of futuristic, sleeker, like I just think they're sweet. Yeah, I agree with you on the design language.
why my one of my best friend's dad had, and I want to say his was like a 94, and I think it was a V70.
Okay. I don't
And
think
then
they
it
make the
was
70 anymore.
I can't,
It was like
yeah,
a
I
good
think
in between.
it was like a 94. I for some reason I feel like V70 is what he had, and it was like, I guess the R or whatever, it was like the fast one, and it was just so sick. It had like 5-spoke wheels, sat really low, and he was like an orthopedic sales. So what he would do is he would back it into his garage, load all the instruments, and then just go to his cases at 4:30 in the morning or whatever, and then
It's
he's
funny you mentioned that. They have like sneaky amounts of power. They're like a lot of the Volvos, especially the
so
newer,
good.
like from the last, 15, 10, 15, 20 years, like there are additions in there that, to your point, like the fast one, they're like scary fast, and they're not marketed that way. They're not
Right.
meant to be. I mean, well, maybe they are meant to be driven that way. I don't know, but like, I mean, I'm not so far down the Volvo rabbit hole that I know of like all the different references for that. But like, I
Yeah.
know of versions like this.
Yeah, I'll have to email you a photo of his. I'll like do a Google search and I'll find it. But
I want to say it's the fast one.
yeah, and his was white over black, I think, which was like, I don't know, like I've always held this guy's dad in such high regard. He was like a second father to me in many cases, and and maybe even me driving a wagon, knowing that he drove a wagon made me feel a little bit more like a man when I was 15 or 16, So like, I don't know, it's cool. But what's um what's the Grail watch? Do you have one?
Oh man. Um, this is kind of a weird thing to say, but like I kind of got it already.
The Vacheron?
Yeah, the Vacheron.
Okay.
To
Enough said, dude. No, that's quite all right.
be totally fair, like it kind of killed the game for me. Like yeah, after I got it, I felt like I mean, there will always be fun, like always be cool watches to kind of like buy and enjoy and check
Yeah.
out. But like, I feel like I got the white whale, and it was kind of it's a strange feeling because I know that like the whole the whole watch collecting thing is supposed. I mean, it is a journey, like, and maybe that will change at some point, or I'll discover another sort of facet of high-end watchmaking that I didn't know about before. But I feel really kind of content in having been fortunate enough to. I mean, the stars kind of just had to align for that.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, well, first of all, I kind of feel like you need to take a coffee shot at Red Whale with your White Whale watch and and tag me on it. But and
It's a pretty good
then
idea. It's a good idea.
and so but Ansel like on the side of that, like could you tell that acquisition story? Because I'm dying to know like how it came about.
Yeah.
Because it's such a sick watch. Like I know James Stacy's obsessed with it. Like we're all fans here.
I haven't told I guess I haven't told this story. I so when you work in the watch space, you work in the I've been so my being able to get it had nothing to do with me working in the watch space. There were no favors done for this at all. And I think this is kind of the punchline. I'll skip directly to the punchline, and it is that um the the kind of underlying theme in this is like is mostly about just like having genuine friends in and around the watch space. I feel like helps. And if you're in
Totally.
this space because you enjoy being in this space and you participate with brands that you enjoy participating with without any pretenses of ever getting anything from it. Because I do know there are a lot of like very specifically transactional relationships in the watch business, which
Absolutely.
don't love. And I think, Rolex is a good example of like I mean, there are guys that like love Rolex and know Rolex and collect Rolex, but can't buy watches because it's become so transactional in that aspect, which is super, super sad because I feel like it turns people away from parts of the journey that could be like really enjoyable and satisfying. But for me, my I bought the watch through a Vacheron boutique that I had. So I'm not gonna get the dates right on this because I had all like I loved the overseas because it felt like just a slightly more capable version of the other two kind of in the space, the Royal Oak and the Nautilus. It felt like just a slightly more um yeah, capable is the best. It's the best word to describe it. Like, the bracelet felt amazing. The case architecture is really interesting. It felt like they were doing something different with the movement that the other two weren't doing, and I kind of love that. Like, especially the dual time and the earlier dual times used a JLC movement, which I also really kind of loved because the presentation of how the dual time was presented was kind of different. And there are early Royal Oak dual times that also use the same movement as Vacheron, but they don't have a running seconds. There are some like they've tweaked the movements in such a way that like the time display is slightly different. So anyway,
Mm.
all this to say, I love the overseas and always wanted one, and I loved there's a very small facet of the overseas. It was limited production between like 2014, I want to say, and 2016. So it was the very end of the pre-Richemont days for Vacheron and the beginning of after the Richemont acquisition. It was kind of this like shoulder collection
Hmm.
called the Deep Stream. So it was Gen 2 overseas watches in both the three-hand version and the dual time, and they had titanium bezels and stainless steel cases. And I love titanium watches. I love just titanium in general. I have pens and tweezers and all kinds like flashlights and all kind like titanium has kind of just taken over my life. And it's also helped me kind of focus my collection obsessions with like, oh, not that one because it's not titanium, so I'm just gonna focus on this thing over here. Like it's helped me kind of like avoid a lot of distractions and stuff. So I
Mm.
love the Deep Stream and I love the overseas. And for several years, that was kind of my grail. It was like I want to get a Deep Stream dual time, but it's very difficult to find them in good condition. Um, and around the time that I started to get, I had sold some stuff off. So this is probably 2000 and like late 2018, early 2019. I'd sold some stuff off and had started hunting for a deep stream in good condition and a dual time. Although the three hand one is really, really awesome because it has the Gen 2 overseas has the 12369 dial, like
Hmm.
applied markers. Nothing against Rolex, but it kind of dunks on an Explorer. And honestly, like for a while, they were about the same price because nobody knew what they were. And you could get a Vacheron Constantin overseas, you know, three-handed version, the dual time with the titanium bezel for around the price of an Explorer, which had blown up, which was absolutely insane to say those words.
Right.
Um, Anyway, so at the end of 2019, or no, maybe it was so the end of 2020. I'm sorry. I may be completely boning my timeline here. I bought my Deep Stream finally. So I found a really good condition dual time, and the papers were dated for 2006 for 2016. So this was after Richemont. So it came with like the newer box, the newer papers, the newer everything after Richemont taken over. But I'd seen older examples of these that came with like a slightly different presentation.
Sure.
Had the dual time. But around that same time, and again, like without me going kind of deep into Google to figuring out like when, because I believe it was the end of 2019, like the fall of 2019, because it was pre-COVID. So yeah, fall of 2019, Vacheron showed the prototype with Corey Richards. Because I feel like that was when James,
Yeah, the TGN.
yeah. So I must have gotten my Deep Stream like in the summer of 2019. It must have been somewhere around then. Anyway, it's inconsequential because shortly after I got it, they told the Corey Richards story. Like he'd come down from this failed attempt on Everest on a new route with his climbing partner. They wore this prototype watch. It made kind of the press rounds. And at that exact time, I was just like, there's no way they would show this watch and not
Produce
make
it.
this watch. There's
Yeah.
no way. Like in all of the Swiss watch industry history, I mean, you can look at even like the prototype Rolex Yachtmaster, the titanium one that was, Ainsley was sailing with it
One of
4 years
Yeah.
ago, 3 or 4
Yeah.
years ago. They're
Yeah.
like, yeah, we're not going to make that. I'm like, bullshit. Like, you're going to make that for sure. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And sure enough, 3, 4 years later, they finally made it. So I was kind of in that boat. I was like, this is absolutely going to happen. Like, that's the dream watch. I mean, I love the JLC powered dual time, but there was the newer generation has just like a cleaner dial presentation. Like I love the orange, like the orange and the titanium. Anyway, it was
Same.
love at like first sight. It was just the
Yeah.
sickest thing ever. Um, and around that time, because I had the dual time, because I had the Deep Stream already, I shortly after I bought it, I sent it to a boutique to have it serviced, and just
Mm.
became friends with the boutique people.
Relationship.
Like
Yeah.
they knew that I had that. They had worked on other watches that I'd kind of pushed through there, and just kind of became fast friends with them. And but we kind of knew each other before that announcement came out. And
Right. So it wasn't just like a hype piece. Yeah.
no, it certainly wasn't a hype piece. And Vacheron was adamantly telling people they were not going to make this watch. And it is a little, I mean, to be fair, like it's a little off brand for them. It's like a tool watch, more or less.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
um and so, we kind of jokingly like I was like, yeah, if they ever make this, like I would love to get one. And they're like, yeah, LOL. And that went on for many months. And then at the end of 2019, that Corey Richards' watch came to Southern California because shortly before it was to be auctioned off with, I believe it was Paul Boutros, did the auction for that. Um, Paul was in town, and so I had a chance to photograph that along with like John Glenn's Breitling Navitimer and like a bunch of other amazing watches from the same auction sequence that were like, these like really noteworthy watches.
Right.
So Corey's watch was to be auctioned off for charity. So I actually had a chance to like photograph it in the metal and spend some time with it, and just like sitting on those photos. I went back to the boutique and was just like, hey guys, like I shot this thing. It's absolutely insane. They'd be crazy not to make it. I know they're telling you they're not going to make it, but if they ever do, you know where to find me. And I just kept that going all through COVID.
Yeah.
Then they finally dropped it in 2021. And at that point, um, when murmurings started happening, I think the boutique had found out about it because the watch was actually leaked. It came out, many weeks or even a month before they were supposed to launch it. So
Oh, I don't
it
remember
took
that.
everybody kind of by surprise. But the boutique at that point had a pretty good idea of like, they weren't told explicitly what it was, but they were told that something was going to happen. And so they
Yeah.
were talking to me kind of in code, like, we don't know what it is. Something's happening, but there's a reason that I'm talking to you. I'm like, okay, I understand this reason. Like, I understand the reason that you're talking to me, even though we both can't acknowledge what this is going to be. And sure enough,
That's awesome, man. Oh, that's special.
It was cool. Yeah. And I know it took them a little while to start to deliver them. So after it was kind of announced in what, August of 21, I picked mine up just before Christmas at the end of the year. So I've been sitting on
Sweet.
it since, and I have it on the orange rubber strap now. And
Awesome.
it's a cool watch. It's a little banged up. It's not as banged up as Corey's, but it's a great traveler's watch, and I wear it a ton, and it's awesome. So yeah, so suffice to say, I don't have the Deep Stream anymore because once it became clear that once it became clear that this was in the pipeline,
Make room.
I sold the Deep Stream to make room. But I will say that I think that the inspiration for Corey's watch came from the Deep Stream because they said we have this titanium version with a steel case. It's quite a bit more rugged. You put it on like a brown or a leather strap. You can like dress it down. It actually looks super awesome. So I'm quite certain, even though I haven't, Christian Salmoni hasn't told me this explicitly, but like I, I do believe that the Richards version, the Everest, was a kind of an extension of the Deep Stream. And so if you
That's
can
so
find a Deep
cool.
Stream now, I mean, it's absolutely awesome watch that I cannot recommend enough, and it has that kind of same utilitarian feel to it. So.
Yeah, I definitely will be looking that up. Uh as in like
I
right
mean, if I were
now.
to get another, I would maybe get the three hand. I would get the three hand on bracelet, because it looks pretty sick.
What size watch is that? Is that a 42?
No, it's smaller.
Oh, good.
I I think the three hand is like 39 or 30. It's quite a bit smaller.
Oh, that's great. You know what's funny is that font, if I'm not mistaken, now I'm not a Breitling guy, but there's like some shades of your wash. You know what I mean?
Of the aerospace. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the numerals a little
I
more.
mean, like as somebody who's never worn either one, quick glance, you're like, oh wait, there's some like maybe some heritage or like some maybe insinuated. That font's a little wider though, isn't it, on the Breitling?
I think yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Breitling, each of the numerals are like a rectangle.
Yeah, a little more
So they're
square.
like completely
Yeah,
almost
yeah,
squared off
yeah, yeah.
completely. But I agree, they're kind of from the same family.
But like
And I've
literally
always loved that
layperson.
like 12 3 6 9 layout. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
totally.
and this is the one and I have asked around for this, but also like not aggressively because I generally wear it on the strap. But the bracelet for the overseas is a work of art. And I know people talk about the bracelet being I was actually before I got my Deep Stream, and part of why I did get that particular Deep Stream was because someone had added the bracelet to it later. Because it came with
Hmm.
two straps, and the bracelets were aftermarket. Well, they're OEM, but like it wasn't sold as a set. And so the previous owner had added the bracelet, and I was pretty lukewarm on the bracelet at first because the sort of running joke in my circle of friends is that like the Vacheron overseas bracelet is quote unquote Crusader man jewelry, which it has this like weird, it looks like, it's from like the Dark Ages. Like it has this kind of ornate feel to it. But
That's
when you
so
have it on the
funny.
wrist and when you hold it in hand, the way everything is faceted out, it's completely hand finished. I mean, it is very like jewelry like, and it's like a bracelet in a way that like the oyster bracelet is not a bracelet. It is like a metal strap, but the overseas bracelet is a bracelet, and it is done at such a high level. I was immediately just like, okay, I get it now. I get it. So
Yeah.
I am sad that I don't have the bracelet for this. I've seen people with overseas put the steel bracelets on them, and it looks sweet, but I'm not about. I mean, I guess there's enough steel elements on the case that I feel like it wouldn't trigger the OCD in my brain that you could have a steel
Right.
bracelet on a mostly titanium watch. But
Right. Right.
I feel like the beauty of it is the lightness of that particular case because the actual dual time in steel is quite a heavy watch, especially on the
Hmm.
bracelet.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's cool.
lightness reigns. So yeah, so it's a long story, but I think again, going back to the punchline, we're here because we want to be here, and we're not here to collect stuff. And I was after a specific kind of watch, and it was really fortuitous that Vacheron made the kind of watch that was an extension of the watch that I already had. So the people that
Yeah.
sold that watch already knew that I loved that type of watch, and we were already friends, and it just became kind of a natural progression. Um,
That's great.
I was really, and I also have to just, and last, I know this is a long story. I
No.
do have to extend, I haven't said anything to anybody at the brand, but it deserves to be said that Vacheron understood that. I mean, I'm not a high roller. I wasn't spending. I had actually never bought a Vacheron from this retailer. So like, I think the general perception is that in order to get the cool stuff, you have to buy all the garbage stuff, garbage, quote unquote. You have to buy
Right.
all the stuff you don't want to get the stuff that you do want. And Vacheron, and I was told this later. I didn't know this up front, but this was kind of added to the story after I met everybody later. But Vacheron kind of had the foresight to say like, okay, we're making I think it's 300 pieces total, 150 of the chronograph, 150 of the GMT.
Yeah.
And they were like, we're going to allocate X number of each reference to the whales, to the guys that have been here since day one and buy watches from us every year. And they kind of gave the boutiques discretion to like identify who those people were, and deservedly so. Those
Sure.
people.
They spent a grip of money. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And that is kind of like the traditional way of how these brands work. But what Vacheron also specified for each of the retailers that were going to be getting these was to allocate an extremely small number of pieces to people that were like that could get into the brand, or that could be um it's cringy to say, but like people who like appreciate watches or would appreciate this watch or would
No,
be
totally.
able to, like, because they're and going back to the Rolex story that I was saying earlier, like there are guys that like love the brand and love the history and love this, that, and the other, and cannot get on the quote unquote list for whatever reason. And it's an absolute shame. And I think Vacheron saw the writing on the wall and they were like, this is a Halo watch, but like it can't only be available to people that usually get Halo watches. Like we want to make sure that like enthusiasts can get access to this in some capacity. So they had that foresight, and again, like all of these other things kind of lined up, and it was able to happen. But yeah, I think brands that understand that like enthusiasts make up for a small percentage of their overall growth or revenue, but they make up for a huge percentage, I think, of like the brand's perception
Yeah.
and in kind of the community, and like being able to kind of put a flag in the sand for guys like us. I felt like for Vacheron has kind of really endeared me to the brand. But again, like it was something I didn't learn until well after the fact, but it
Yeah.
really kind of solidified them as like, you know, pretty pretty tops in my book.
Well, flag in the sand or flag into Everest, one or the other. Yeah, that's amazing, dude. And congrats, because it's such a killer watch. It's twofold there with that story from a brand perspective, because it's like I respect the hell out of Vacheron for doing that and like allocating certain pieces for like the guy who needs, to get sort of ushered into this type of brand, which is incredible. But if you're you, potentially, maybe me, you buy that and you might be done. You're like, thanks, I don't need anything else. You know what I mean?
We even kind of joked about that. It was like, now
Yeah.
what? Like
Yeah.
it was like the
You're
first and only transaction from this customer, but at the same time, like that wasn't their goal.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before. You go to a good doctor, they heal you, and you never see them again. Like so. It's
A great
like,
way to put it.
um, and what's funny is I heard something the other day, as you said, that we're not just here to collect stuff, which I couldn't agree more. Um, the reason you collect watches, or at least the reason I collect watches, to borrow some line from somebody I heard recently that I cannot remember who said it, but it's what these things tell you more than the time. You know what I mean? Like when you look down at it, it says something else aside from just the time. And that's what this thing's all about.
Couldn't agree more. I could not agree more.
Zach, this was fun, dude. I don't even know where else to take this conversation without it being 3 hours long. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I'll come down and have a beer, or
yeah,
or if you find yourself up in NorCal.
100%. Well, dude, thanks so much, and glad we got the FaceTime and
Yes.
laid this one down, dude. This was super fun.
Wesley, this was a delay, and I appreciate what you're doing, and
Thanks, man.
thanks for getting me on here. It was awesome to meet you, and let's
sure.
let's get a beer real soon.
Okay, look forward to it.
All right, brother.
See ya. This wraps up this episode of the Standard Age podcast. If you like what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.